Welcome back. Today we're diving into a full explainer of a truly massive academic monograph that tries to tackle one of the most profound questions in science. Where exactly does the mind come from? We're going to trace the origins of intelligence, and we're not just treating it as a human story, but as a universal biological phenomenon. Let's get right into it. For the longest time, we've basically operated on this incredibly human-centric assumption. We love to think of our intelligence as this rare cosmic accident, right? Like some miraculous leap that puts us at the absolute top of the biological food chain. But the comprehensive research we're looking at today completely challenges that narrative. It asks us to seriously consider whether intelligence is actually just a natural, inevitable attractor for any complex system. The source material's executive summary actually lays this out perfectly. It states that advanced cognition has evolved independently multiple times in primates, cetaceans, corvids, parrots, and cephalopods. That beautifully illustrates that intelligence is not just a one-off event. It's what's called a convergent evolutionary attractor. Basically, nature keeps arriving at the exact same brilliant solution, just using totally different biological pathways. So, here's our roadmap. We are going to redefine intelligence, establish the pre-human baseline, look at how the human brain was rebuilt, dig into the power of language and cumulative culture, and finally, project all the way out to the next cognitive frontier. Starting right off with part 1, redefining intelligence. So, the absolutely crucial point here is that intelligence is not just about acing an IQ test or doing complex calculus. Based on this huge synthesis of psychology, neuroscience, and evolutionary biology, intelligence is defined as the capacity to acquire, retain, and apply knowledge and skills to achieve goals across a range of contexts. It's highly multidimensional. It's about learning from your environment, holding on to that info, predicting what's going to happen next, and adapting your behavior to actually succeed. And with that definition locked in, we move to part 2, the pre-human baseline. We are talking deep time here. Over 700 million years ago, early life was literally just navigating via chemical gradients. By about 700 million years ago, we start seeing the very first synapses and nerve nets in things like jellyfish. Then boom, the Cambrian explosion hits around 600 million years ago, giving us centralized nervous systems. Fast forward to 200 million years ago, and the mammalian neocortex finally shows up. So this basic neurological recipe was slowly simmering on the evolutionary stove for hundreds of millions of years. Now, here is a totally mind-blowing revelation. Memory, the absolute foundational building block of intelligence, existed before brains even evolved. It sounds impossible, but even single-celled bacteria like E. coli show memory-like behavior. They can actually take recent chemical concentrations, compare them to current ones, and use that to navigate. So memory is an ancient, fundamental biological trait. It is definitely not a recent human invention. Nature actually cracked the intelligence code multiple times through convergent evolution. Primates did it by expanding the mammalian neocortex. Birds, on the other hand, evolved these completely analogous, highly advanced cognitive networks despite not even having a neocortex. And cephalopods, like the octopus, they basically just shoved 2/3 of their neurons directly into their arms. It's totally different hardware yielding remarkably similar, incredibly advanced cognitive results. Okay, so how did we get from that baseline to human cognition? Let's get into part 3, rebuilding the human brain. 86 billion. That is the staggering number of neurons inside the modern human brain. At our core, we are essentially linearly scaled primates. We don't have some completely magical, uniquely human brain architecture. What we actually have is a massive neuronal advantage that's just packed into a typical primate structure. But keeping 86 billion neurons fired up comes with a really steep price tag. Our brains consume roughly 20% of our resting metabolic rate. Just think about that for a second. An organ making up a measly 2% of your body mass is hogging a fifth of your total energy. You're literally burning calories just by thinking. This intense biological cost meant our ancestors had to completely overhaul their diets, likely by inventing cooking, just to fuel this massive cognitive engine. But, size isn't the whole story here. Take Homo erectus, our ancestor from almost 2 million years ago. They had a huge increase in brain size, hitting up to 1,100 cubic centimeters, but it retained a pretty primitive ape-like organization. Homo sapiens, though, we developed a unique globular shape and saw a massive expansion right in the prefrontal cortex. It's kind of like the difference between just plugging in a bigger hard drive versus installing an entirely new, vastly more complex operating system. So how exactly did that system upgrade happen? Well, it came down to some tiny, incredibly specific genetic tweaks. Genes like RHGAP11B popped up to induce extra folding and expansion in our cortex. Then you've got SRGAP2C, which slowed down our brain maturation. That's a process called neoteny, and it gave us a much longer childhood to actually sit back, learn, and adapt. Oh, and FOXP2 came in and modified the neural circuits that are super crucial for fine motor control and speech. Put it all together, and these microscopic mutations completely rebuilt human cognition from the inside out. And that upgraded brain completely set the stage for our next big leap. Part 4. Language and cumulative culture. Armed with this expanded prefrontal cortex and our brand new language skills, humans entered what evolutionary biologists call the cognitive niche. Basically, instead of waiting around to evolve sharper claws for hunting or a thicker fur to survive the winter, we used general intelligence and our shared culture to invent weapons and sew clothing. We essentially outsourced our entire survival strategy away from pure biology and over to shared environmental knowledge. This shared knowledge builds into what researchers refer to as the ratchet effect. Think of human culture like a literal ratchet gear. It locks in progress so we never slip backward. Step 1 is high-fidelity transmission, which we mostly do through language. Step 2 is innovation, where somebody comes along and adds a new, better idea. And Step 3 is teaching, making sure that exact modification gets passed to the next generation. Plenty of other animals learn socially, sure, but without high-fidelity teaching and language, their cultures almost never accumulate complexity. Humans, we just keep ratcheting up. Okay, this part is amazing. Our culture actually became so powerful that it looped back around and reshaped our physical DNA through gene-culture coevolution. Take dairy farming, for example. We invented about 10,000 years ago, and that creates a completely new evolutionary pressure, which actually results in the genetic adaptation of lactose tolerance in adult humans. So our culture basically put us on a biological treadmill where our ideas were literally altering our own genome. Which brings us right to the present day, Part 5, the next cognitive frontier. Think about how fast our collective memory has evolved over history. Around 3200 BCE, the invention of writing gave us our very first external memory drive. Then the printing press hits in 1440 and democratizes all that knowledge. Jump to 1990, the internet makes the whole shebang instantly searchable. And now, in the 2020s, large language models and artificial intelligence represent the absolute latest evolutionary step. According to this research, technology isn't just some handy tool. It is a literal direct continuation of human cognitive evolution. But here's where it gets super interesting, comparing our biological constraints against this new technological substrate. Human working memory is strictly bottlenecked. We can only really hold about 4 to 7 chunks of info in our minds at any given time. AI, on the other hand, operates with these massive context windows, processing a vast amount of data simultaneously. Now sure, AI totally lacks our grounded physical embodiment and our long horizon planning, but it absolutely shatters our biological working memory limits. So, tying all this together, the scientific evidence strongly supports the hypothesis that intelligence is a convergent evolutionary attractor. It's a universal phenomenon that just keeps popping up everywhere. The research also strongly supports that our technology is a direct continuation of our biological evolution. Now, the idea that intelligence is completely substrate independent, meaning it doesn't even need to be made of biological cells to be real, well, that remains plausible, but for now, it's unproven. And that leaves us with one absolutely wild final thought to chew on. If intelligence isn't some uniquely human miracle, but actually just a universal physical recipe made up of memory, learning, and adaptation, does it actually require a biological substrate to exist at all? As we inch closer to artificial general intelligence, you really have to wonder if the mind has finally found a way to just outgrow the very biology that created it. Thanks for hanging out with me on this journey through the evolution of intelligence. Catch you next time.